President Trump says he plans to raise global tariffs from 10 to 15% just one day after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down his use of emergency power to impose them. In a 6-3 ruling, the court rejected the administration's reliance on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, dealing a setback to the president's trade agenda. President Trump responded by signing a proclamation for a temporary 10% tariff increase, citing the Trade Act of 1974. The tariffs would last up to 150 days. President Trump says tariffs will remain central to his economic policy despite the legal challenges. And joining us now to break down what this actually means is Margaret Kidd, who's the Department Chair of Logistics and Supply Chain Management at San Jacinto College. Margaret, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Well, thank you, Celeste and Frank. Exciting to be here.
I just got to ask you, right off the bat, what did the Supreme Court of the United States actually rule, and how big of a blow is this to the president's trade agenda?
Well, essentially on Friday, the Supreme Court came back and said that the president does not have an authority, the Constitution does, to set tariffs. And while that sounded like big news, and it is, he did turn around late Friday and filed an executive order to establish Section 122 tariffs, which will last 150 days. And it started out at 10%, and over the weekend it had escalated to 15%.
Wow.
So he still has legal authority to do something with tariffs.
Absolutely. He has a toolbox. The thing with the Section 122 tariffs is after 150 days, Congress has to get involved if they want to keep those in place. Now, I have to think with midterms coming up, that one's going to be a little bit of a stretch.
Right. But, again, looking at this from just a legal perspective, can the president actually pivot to go to the Trade Act of 1974? And exactly, is that vulnerable to change as well?
Well, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace. Small and mid-sized businesses are absolutely bearing the brunt of this. They just don't have the deep pockets. But there's a number of tools, for instance, like the Section 301, which is more of an investigation to unfair trade practices. So even when this expires in 150 days, he has other options that he can move forward. So we've all experienced inflation in housing and clothing and cars and electronics. It's still here. It's not going away with this action.
And you said bearing the brunt. And I think that's the question that most Americans are asking and want to know. If tariffs rise to 10 to 15%, who feels it first? Is it going to be the consumer? Is it going to be a small business owner? Is it going to be the trading partners?
Well, definitely the consumers spend it. And I brought this study from the New York Federal Reserve. They completed this last year, and I'm going to I don't know that the camera can pick it up, but 90% of manufacturers and 75% of service firms paid tariffs on goods they brought in. 75% passed those along, and basically within the first 3 months, consumers were already paying higher tariffs. Sorry, that's reproduced from the Fed's report.
So cleaning this mess up, is anybody getting any money back? Because apparently the tariffs that were here for the last 9 months were not legal, and that money should be $175 billion, and that money should be given back to those who paid it. But according to Scott Bissett, it's not going to happen.
Well, consumers certainly aren't getting any money back, so let's just put that on the table.
Right.
Now, as far as businesses that paid these tariffs, this could be stuck in litigation for years. It's not going to happen automatically. It was not addressed in the Supreme Court ruling, which is interesting. And there was approximately $200 billion collected. So more than likely, it'll go to the Court of International Trade and then come back down to an appellate court. But again, this is a long-term proposition and no guarantees.
And then there are countries who have negotiated tariffs with Trump and say they negotiated 19, 20%. And now this ruling comes out and he has to switch over to a 15%. Do those countries get to go back and do a redo?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but it certainly puts some uncertainty into those trade deals. And we've already heard that China is balking about this, right?
Well, and
no
the
surprise.
market is too.
Right.
Market's down big time today.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's status quo. The tariffs are there. It's just a new name.
Well, and as we look at this temporary 150-day tariff increase, how does it disrupt supply chain and, as Frank just mentioned, financial markets?
Well, it's the uncertainty, and then it's really, at the end of the day, companies are in the business to make a profit, and your margins are really squeezed when you have these tariffs. So, I mean, eventually, when a good becomes so expensive, consumers stop buying. I mean, let's look at restaurants in Houston. It's a great example. When was the last time you went out to eat? Were you surprised at your bill at the end of the evening? Tariffs.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, and I mean, even salads, things like that.
Right. A
I know.
pita. You're like,
Well, and I've heard arguments to people that so much of our community is on GLP-1s that people now go out and split a lot of dinners. It's like, we'll just split a steak. We'll just split a chicken dish, So there's that too.
outside factors. But Margaret, I've got to wonder, what type of position does this put when we're looking at the relationships and diplomatic relationships when it comes to business with other countries? And when can other countries start to retaliate, and how quickly does that look like?
Well, there's without a doubt a whole geopolitical realignment. And there are a lot of other things that are occurring that are creating additional volatility. And we can look at what happened in South America a month ago and what's happening in the Middle East. So we're certainly living in interesting times, and it's challenging. It's very difficult to make long-term CapEx decisions, if you're building a new facility somewhere, or even OpEx decisions.
Right, and this is a broad term, but I just keep thinking that, we're getting very much into the minutiae and the details of tariffs of 10%, 15%. We're looking at the relationships between China or India, but the larger economic implication that this could have on our country, do you think it is going to be a short-term impact that we're feeling it now and eventually this will weigh? Or is this something that even after the president, let's say his term is up, we're still going to be dealing with this situation?
Well, we don't know what happens in elections down the road, but certainly if it's a short-term blip, there's some pain that we're experiencing. I brought another chart just to kind of give your viewers an idea about tariffs, and while they may be on the initial components, for instance, like with building products, you have both steel, aluminum, machinery that escalate the price of building. I mean, that's been a sector that's been hit really hard with tariffs.
Well, and people forget, it's as the products come into the country, that's where the tariffs are paid. And they're paid by the people who then sell those products to us. So we end up, they either eat the tariff cost and they don't pass on the upcharges, or they do pass them on, and that's why we see things going up, right?
Well, the majority are passing them on because, again, you're in business for profit.
We have to be.
Yeah, you have to be, right? So I think one sector that we're waiting to see what happens is pharmaceuticals. While there haven't been tariffs, there's been a threat of like a 250% tariff. What we did see last year is a rush of a bunch of pharmaceutical companies to onshore and commit to build some manufacturing here in the U.S.
Do you think that, did Trump come out with his own sort of prescription?
Trump RX.
Yeah, Trump RX. Do you think that's why?
I don't know that that's why, but I think there's concerns. I mean, you just gave the example of Ozempic. People pay $1,000 a month for that. Imagine the cost with a 250% tariff if it wasn't manufactured here.
Well, there you have it.
So when we're looking at the ramifications of this for people here in Houston, I would imagine the person that's going to feel this most is a small business owner.
Small and mid-sized business owners, absolutely. They don't have the lines of credit. They don't have the staff to do alternative sourcing, and they just don't have the capital. And so the furniture sector is a great example where small and mid-sized businesses have been squeezed out. It's been very painful, the tariffs that we've seen in that sector. And let's just hope for the best that these tariffs maybe go away in the next couple of years.
Well, at the end of the day, the 15% global tariff, that's going to be it, right? I mean, there's not going to be some hidden 20% out there.
Well, there's no guarantees. From what we've seen this last 12 months in 2025 is there are a number of iterations of tariffs, from Liberation Day, where they're astronomically off the charts, to some more negotiated rates that were closer to 15, 20%. I don't have a crystal ball.
Right. That's tough, right? And, I was just going to ask, I know you don't have a crystal ball. However, the president says tariffs will remain central to his economic policy. So he's basically saying, regardless of what the Supreme Court decided, I'm moving forward. What type of conversation would you imagine the president is having with his economic committee? I don't know.
Well, he's looking at
his advisors.
He's looking at these alternatives, these other statutes that he can use to tax, and so it's the Section 301. He's currently using the Section 122, and then there's the 232, which steel and aluminum fall under.
Why didn't he just go with these in the beginning? Because he wanted to just power grab and really crank these ridiculous tariffs up there?
Well, I can't answer that, but I think I think that it was strategically probably a strategic decision.
So if it was a strategic decision, do you think that it was basically he's coming in hard to put himself in a position for the U.S. to be able to negotiate?
Well, what I think is that there were some hard lessons learned that we're over-dependent in manufacturing in Asia, China in particular. Mm-hmm. And it really, in certain sectors and certain industries, became a national and economic security situation. And so that's why during the Biden administration, we saw the CHIPS Act. So we had, manufacturing kind of moving back onshore. With Trump, we've seen the pharmaceutical sector, again, be pretty aggressive in trying to bring some CapEx funds here. I mean, at the end of the day, not every industry is going to onshore, and it doesn't make economic sense. But I think it's a wake-up call. I mean, we do need to bring back some critical industries. I'm not one to make a judgment about how it's being implemented. It's been, a bit chaotic and unpredictable, especially if you're smaller, mid-sized business person.
Well, this may not be a question for you, so forgive me, but it seems to be a wake-up call to Trump that once these different executive orders get to the Supreme Court, you're not going to get away with all of them.
Well, it was interesting to see the alignment on the votes last week, and I think the Trump administration was surprised based on the news that we all read over the weekend.
Well,
right?
and then they're going to have to face him at the State of the Union address tomorrow night, because traditionally the Supreme Court's also right there in the front row.
It'll be interesting to watch. We'll all be tuned in.
Yeah, he wasn't very nice about them. I mean, he really was insulting.
And you can actually tune in to NPR tomorrow night to watch the State of the Union right here on News 88.7. But I did want to go back and ask you, Margaret, from your expertise and your vantage point, understanding supply chain and the industry, has there been anything that the president you feel like was surprisingly accurate, or actually maybe something went in the right direction when we're looking at this from a tariff perspective?
Well, on the overall tariffs, I can't really comment, but I do think that there was a strategy to attract some key industries. Mm-hmm. And I think that is occurring. But again, in an interconnected global economy, regardless if the manufacturing's occurring here, the raw materials component parts are coming from all over the world. Mm-hmm. If we take an automobile, which has over 25,000 parts, those are not all going to be sourced here, or a critical ingredient, right? So we are connected to other economies, and it's in our best interest to have positive trading relationships with our trading partners.
Well said.
And moving forward, what do you think is something that most people should be looking for in this next couple of days?
Well, I don't really see any big changes. The tariffs are still in place. I don't see that anything's going to escalate because I think based on current tariffs, that's built into pricing. I would be concerned if tariffs were escalated at a higher rate, like through a Section 301, which it could certainly be higher than 15%.
Wow. Margaret Kidd is the Department Chair of Logistics and Supply Chain Management at San Jacinto College. Margaret, thank you so much. It's always great to have you on Hello Houston.
Yep, nice to see you again.
Thank you, Celeste and Frank.